through World War II after going through two wars,
mm,
and how do we recover? And
mm,
what's important that to make it happen is that we gathered the people. For example, I lived in North Dakota,
mm,
and there was a lot of farmers that didn't have electricity in their homes and their farms,
mm,
even in some of the cities. So they formed a co-op. A co-op is taking a county and breaking it into a township. And each township there was a board, and they sat down. What is our needs? What is our goal?
wow,
They went to the government and they borrowed money. And if the government didn't have enough money, they went to the international government,
hmm,
to the UN.
wow,
And basically they set it up that it was like a factory where you have stocks, and the same principle
mm,
that for 20 years now I had that system in my home, and I'm still getting dividends.
mm.
I got one more
So,
dividend to come.
so everybody was
Every
part of the
the
process.
profits, no matter how long you, as long as you're alive, and if I die, then they'll give me the whole thing that I own.
Mm,
But I'm a member of that portion of co-op,
okay.
and all the profits after they pay all the bills goes to the members.
Mm-hmm.
So like this year, I got $56,
Mm,
but
okay.
that's just 20, 30 years later.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still
Mm-hmm.
getting checks from them, and I haven't used their
You
service.
haven't done anything,
But
or
see, they spread it out over years, and their profits is always goes to membership.
so have it. You continue to build in it.
It
Your
wasn't
dividends
it
will
wasn't
be.
just the electrical part of it. That was just one part of it because the farmers needed that. But then when the farmers got electrified, then all of a sudden, okay, here the refrigerators, stoves, everything that was electric, factories needed to be built.
Mm,
So then there was people that lived maybe even in the cities
mm,
gathered the same way and started the stock market. Somebody had an idea, I want to build refrigerators or Maytag or any of these companies.
mm,
They bought stocks so they could put up the buildings that they need, and we still have that system today yet.
wow.
And the people that are have the stocks, and if they bought it in the beginning, like Walmart, you maybe spent $1,000 or even $10,000. $10,000 in 10 years, you was a millionaire
Mm-hmm.
because the company grew that fast. So
Right.
this is the system that we're trying to instill into the third world countries, that you have to multiply and gather these people and see what you can afford to be able to put in because you can borrow the money, but then when the money is paid back to the bank, then the profits start to come and the profits are given to members.
So how does this start? How does one get started with something like that? Like,
Well, I think that when you get started like that, is you form the cluster first, a group of people.
mm-hmm.
You set up maybe 4 or 5 leaders
Right.
and sit down and say, okay, we can go to this bank, we can go to that bank. And when the bank looks at who's coming in there
Mm-hmm.
and even set up paperwork that this is a co-op, these are all the members, and you go to the bank and the bank knows that if there's 200 members,
Mm-hmm.
even if 50 of them fail, they're still
Mm-hmm.
going to get their money back,
Mm-hmm.
or there's going to be some profits coming. So even the stock market is a good example even of that. But there you have a choice. You can go into the stock market in the beginning when the company is being formed,
Mm-hmm.
different from what a co-op does. And you had brought it up before that it's a diversification.
Mm-hmm.
What is the need? Everybody don't just grow tomatoes,
Right.
and
Right.
everybody don't grow wheat. Uh, Farmers in that times, but the best thing that I seen is that when I was just maybe 3, 4 years old, everything was done to a threshing machine.
Mm-hmm.
There was no combines. There
Right.
was no tractors. Everything was done by horseback. I even remember I had a pitch bundles when I was maybe 7, 8 years old because they still had threshing. But then all of a sudden, my dad says, even like the Model A and the Model T, Ford, seeing that we need to diversify and we can create assembly line where we can build these cars. We got our first car when I was 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't go through this system, like a lot of us experienced. But how does this nation grow? And look at what Ford does today. If you invested money back when the Model T was built, how much money would you be worth now?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Millions,
even,
yeah, millions.
I'm going to bring it up to date. Tesla.
Mm-hmm.
Tesla's making electric cars.
Yeah,
And what is the future? And he's making batteries that last 1,000,000 miles.
yeah,
Uh,
and that's what's
he's
needed now.
he's
Yeah,
making even a battery that you could take a 45 pistol and shoot through it 6 times, and it still has power. It can be charged in by the time you drink one cup of coffee, 6 minutes. But see,
wow.
this is what we need to find these people that have the minds, like even Edison, for an example. He knew he could create a light bulb.
Mm-hmm.
127 times he failed. And
Persistence,
30, he was persistent, but
persistence.
then there was people that supported him.
Mm-hmm.
And look what even happening today. Look at the new bulbs that we got now. I'm an electrician by
The
trade.
LEDs, yeah.
You got a bulb that gives 100 watts or 200 or 125 watts of light power,
It
but it's
consumes
only
nothing.
using 9 watts
That's right.
to make that thing burn. Well, see, Edison's thing has been extended, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I'm trying to instill into countries. Are we preparing our children, our grandchildren for the next step? And
Mm-hmm.
even the women in India, I'm going to use them as an example, they stood in line on the highway just a
Mm-hmm.
couple months ago, shoulder to shoulder, 128 miles. How many people were that? How many women were there? But see, the women are saying because they go through the pain to bear this child and they want something to come out of it. And the only thing, I don't care what race or whatever you're coming from, whatever color you are, the brain is the same. And the only thing that's
Mm-hmm.
lacking is education.
Education, yeah. Yeah, so education is key. And this is what they're standing for. They
Yes.
want their kids to do better. And that's we all want that. We all want our kids to do better than we did. And at least we should.
I think the worst thing that we're
And
doing in America is that we're taking the computers and we're following some other countries and playing games on the computer.
yeah.
And the most important game you do is the game of life.
Hmm.
You're born at a certain time and maybe you live to be 80, 90 years old. And then some of us even now are living to be 100 years old. But
Yes.
what are you
Yes.
doing with your education? Are you transferring it back to the next generation?
Hmm.
And even Mayo Clinic now says that the children from birth until 12, when they're learning languages, and I experience that. I can go to India and I can teach for 3 hours, and the kids want more.
Mm.
Here in America, because they have the toys and the tablets and the cell phones, you teach them for 15 minutes and then you lose them.
Yeah.
On the other hand, my daughter keeps telling me, why don't you teach here in America? Go to the school. But I'm not restricted.
Hmm.
Go ahead, you add something to it.
No, I'm just it's true. I mean, what we're teaching, we're getting away from the principles of math, science, English,
History.
languages, history, and things of that nature. And we're getting involved with other things that we shouldn't be getting involved in, quite frankly, because they don't make us more competitive in the world market. But in the countries like what we're broadcasting to, I hope that they're teaching them the things that they should be, the sciences, the math, and
Yeah,
the
but
languages
you
and
go
so
to the
forth.
schools and that's missing.
And that's what is needed. I hope that from that perspective, they don't follow America and
Mm.
get away from those basics, because it's those basics that will help them to be a better nation tomorrow than they are today,
Yes.
right? And unfortunately, if America continues on the path that it's on, we will regress. We will not
Yes.
advance. We will go backwards because of the nonsense that they're teaching.
Hmm.
But I believe that the secret to success in the nations that we're talking to is the education, and and but it's not just education in terms of formal education. It's education just in everyday life,
Yes.
right? What you've done today, what you've done to get you as a parent to supply for your family, to make you successful. you can teach that to them, and that can be a foundation right there. You know.
And
So.
India gives you a good example. The mothers are saying, and the grandmothers, all the women are saying, we had pain to have that child, and we expect to give the best. And with Mayo even uh, doing research on food and whatever else we need. This is what we need in the world.
Hmm.
We need to have technology and more the even adding stuff like me for an example. I MSG. If I go have food that has MSG in it, my stomach is real tender,
Hmm.
and I end up going to the bathroom in a half an hour. But it's an education because I was on Mayo Clinic's study for 17 years because of my stomach, and we found out things that we can pass on to the other generations. For an example, the men in India, they live to be 50, 60, and the most is 65 years old, and they
Hmm.
die.
Hmm.
And they're finding out because they eat too hot of food, they burn their intestinal tract. It's little hairs in there,
Wow.
supposed
Yeah.
to take all the vitamins and everything that we need for our strength, and they get burned from the hot spices.
Oh,
Pretty soon it does
wow.
not absorb anymore,
Wow.
and then pretty soon when you get, for an example now, bacon
Hmm.
that just came out here 6 months ago, and they were saying that people that ate 2 pieces of bacon every day for 10 years had 50% more chance of having a heart attack. That's record.
Wow.
You know why? It isn't the bacon, it isn't the smoke that flavored the bacon. It's the sodium nitrate to add to it so it don't spoil.
Hmm.
And why do we have to have sodium nitrate these days when you got freezers and you
Hmm.
got refrigerators? See, we're doing things on a
Got it.
level of some of our corporations and even some of our food levels that they're taking, and it's always preservatives to make it last longer on the shelf.
Hmm.
For
It's
an
all
example,
marketing.
one guy was working for a cookie company and in a factory, and when he was just starting up, one of the air conditioners didn't work. So he crawled up in the attic and he took some cookies with him. He didn't eat them all. He laid them on the air conditioner. 30 years later, he goes back up in the same place, and them cookies were still good yet.
I didn't eat
Preservative. He bit into one of them to see if it, because they're 30 years old. He bit
them.
into one of them, but see, it proves something to us, doesn't it? Are we doing research? Are we studying? Are we allowing sometimes in society, and it's all about money, or is it about longevity,
Hmm.
or what are we doing? And it all goes back to that same curve. Are we teaching one another?
Yeah.
Just like even myself. They made a piece of machinery because they had cut the main nerve in my stomach.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have no acid. So they made a piece of machinery and I swallowed it through my nose
Mm-hmm.
and I went out and ate the worst food I could eat and see what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Finding out I didn't have no acid.
Mm-hmm.
So then they started to construct and they found an acid that I could use. And this is 45 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They saved me for today. Can we do that? Can we get to the 100 mark? Can we, uh, it's like even something was said today. When you're working to survive in the system and raising your family and everything else, then you get retirement, but you're not retired.
Yeah.
You have an education that you leave behind.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you can do that, because I worked on the Indian reservation, and many times I'd go in the backyard and they were having a meal, and there's Grandpa. They didn't have no technology, didn't have no computers,
Mm-hmm.
but there was Grandpa. There was the computer,
But he was passing
and he was
something
passing
down.
stories on
Yes.
what works and
Yes.
what don't
Yes.
work.
Yes.
And we're missing that curve. Our family unit has got to a place where everything being text. Nobody even hears each other. Nobody even knows what your need is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want a great nation, you need to start bringing your communities together and make forming a co-op.
So let's talk about this because this is something that's interesting. So with all of the advances and all of the good things that we have in place, they all have a downside,
Yes.
right? And the question that I have to ask you is really, we're talking about introducing this technology and these things to people who don't have this technology. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, there's advances, but there's also some downfalls, right? Because what we are today, they will become tomorrow
Yes,
if there aren't some boundaries in there.
and
You
education.
know, right, and education. It's so how do we help those nations to have the technology that we, are so involved in, but not become like us?
Well, you can
You
use
know.
people even as example, like Bill Gates for an example. He was failing high school, but
Mm-hmm.
he liked to play with computers when he was a kid. And there's a lot of people that even I know it's two or three of them that are hackers, but they took computers apart when they were 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But see, they educated themselves, and they
Mm-hmm.
went online, and I'm sure they asked questions, and
Of course.
more than likely, the parents of a child like that that turns out to be a genius
Mm-hmm.
is somebody that's teaching them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I'm trying to put across. That computer and that tablet or that cell phone, just like Jerry's got here now, is the fact that there's many different avenues that you can use. And you can go from your cell phone to it. We're broadcasting right now at a table in a dining room
Mm-hmm.
and talking to how much of the world are we talking to? We could be talking to all of
Mm-hmm.
them. And if you look at even Tesla, if he wants to put up satellites, and Apple's going to follow this, but they haven't got the means to be able to put the satellite up in the sky. Where Tesla's has got into the missile thing, and he sent his car up to Mars. Just think about it.
Yeah.
But it was, can I do this?
Yes. Yes.
And his
Yes.
goal is to send some people to Mars and see if we can use some of that over there.
Of course.
Send back people back to the moon again.
Mm-hmm.
And who's going to be educated? I think the story of even our astronauts going to the moon, and there were six colored secretaries that were
Mm-hmm.
sitting and listening to the engineers while they were putting this whole program together.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it came time and there was a disaster, there was 13 times that the women gave the result to save them so they got back to the world. All of us need to be informed. All of us need to be teaching, and as a community coming together, all the different gifts, and
Mm-hmm.
then looking at the child. If he loves music, hey, why shouldn't he be in music?
Mm-hmm.
But if he loves computer, let him have the computer. Give it to him. And even my youngest daughter called today, and she's got three grandchildren that are um, 2 and 5 and 6 years old. I says, are you teaching them how to use the computer?
Mm-hmm.
Because the computer
Of
today,
course.
you go to Google, and my wife is just astonishes her sometimes that she's got a question. She goes to Google and she asks, and she gets the
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where's your teaching at?
Yeah.
It's a broadcast of the whole world coming
Mm-hmm.
together.
Mm-hmm.
But if we didn't go to the moon, we won't have computers.
Mm-hmm.
That's what formed it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we think, oh, we're spending all this money to do this, but it's a process. It's created, and the university needs to be used. Even as an electrician, and a lot of people don't even know this. What creates lightning? That's power, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And if we can harness that, it can be harnessed maybe in the future. But it's the Earth spinning 24 hours a day, and the dust that's coming off the Earth and coming out of the universe is friction. And as the Earth is
Mm-hmm.
spinning, the,
It's
causes the
building.
friction to create
It's
electricity.
building. I get
And
it.
then when the rainstorm comes, it gives it a pathway to hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can we harness that? See, there's so many things that we could use, even just like the battery that Tesla even formed. He bought Nevada, 10,000 acres, and I said, what is he buying 10,000 acres for? He's building a factory. Why so much? That's where the mineral that he needs to build these
It's right
batteries.
there.
And his
You can
factory's going to be
harvest it.
sitting right next to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
See, that's what creates a nation. And just like even in America, back when the soldiers came back, we had all these soldiers that didn't have jobs. We created jobs. We started to build dams to
Hmm.
retain water, like in North Dakota, for an example.
And that's
Our
power
humidity
again.
was
Yeah.
40%, and as soon as the dam was built, it's 70% now.
Hmm.
Our wheat from 30 bushels an acre to 90 bushels an acre. We increased everything. It takes people, it takes knowledge, and it takes creating something. And look at even like the Hoover Dam, enough electricity, enough water to keep three big cities like Los Angeles, but also uh, I would say maybe 30% of California
Hmm.
is watered by the Hoover Dam.
Wow. Wow.
And all the food that we are sending to other nations, which they could create the same way as we did. If they would come together as a co-op and form and build these dams, build electric systems, everything they need, everything is all generated and it's here to be able to use.
So how do we bring this then to a, I think the question is, someone who's watching this broadcast say, well, okay, I'm just a little guy. It's just me and my five buddies. How do we do something that's bigger than what we have now, better than what we have now? Where do we begin? That's the whole thing, right? And I think that on the small scale is just recognizing that if we each have something to contribute, and whatever you can contribute to start there. For example, we talked about the farm. I mean, it doesn't hurt to plant if you have, a backyard or someplace like that, to have a little bed and grow a crop, something
Mhm.
small. This way you have something to feed yourself, and you do enough that you can feed others. And then you share that. The skills that you have, maybe teach somebody else how to do what you can do. Teach somebody else how to build something, and then have someone else teach you how to do something. It really starts with taking what you have. I remember when we were kids, like, this is the funniest thing in my life. I think I mentioned this once before. I'm not sure if it was with you, but we had mountain bikes before there was ever such a thing. You know, one guy knew how to weld.
Yeah.
Another guy knew how to do something else, how to tune bikes. Another guy knew how to do something, paint. Another guy knew how to, each of us knew how to, and we contributed. We were kids.
Mhm.
We were 13 years old, right?
Yep.
And we would find bicycle parts and things like that, and just take them and say, well, okay, you do this, I do this, and we made things. Well, we didn't know enough to know that what we built back then, which was just an idea, right, is has become a thing, and now people are making millions of dollars. But before there was bicycles with shocks, we had them. We had motorcycle shocks. As someone threw pieces away, we took them and we welded them onto our bicycles. We had motorcycle handlebars on them and everything. I mean, we paint, and they look real pretty because we
Yeah.
painted them and everything.
And that's sold.
Well, we didn't sell it. It was for our
Yes.
use, but we didn't know that 20 years later,
It's
that what we
just,
built as teenagers is now selling in stores for hundreds and thousands of
yeah.
dollars. You know, I mean, but we had a prototype. So an idea can become something great, and I don't think we should discount the ideas that we have. The best ideas are the ones that meet a need, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is exactly how things get built. In fact, everything that is built meets a need. Everything that is built and is useful, I should say, you
And
know,
anything that's
right?
bought, it meets the need.
It meets a need, right? So that it comes back down to, this is one of the things that we've said several weeks ago when we started this broadcast, is find the need and meet it,
Yes.
right?
And it might take a dozen people to even do it.
Right. If it's
Or
food, then
one might
okay.
have it and have it do it all.
Yeah. If it's building something in your community, find whatever the need is, get together as that co-op that you were talking about, and determine that we're going to meet this need as a community, right? And I think that great ideas will come out of that. Great success will come out of that. if we can harness the power of our minds and our collective working together to accomplish
I'll give you
this.
an example, even just in my life. We talked about my stomach,
Mm-hmm.
and just because Mayo Clinic built this piece of equipment, just didn't use it on me. They started using it on other people,
Mm-hmm.
finding out that 70% of people being treated for high acid reflux is not right.
Mm-hmm.
Because anytime you have lots of gas, it's being fermented and it's not being digested. And you need to add certain chemicals to your body to be able to accomplish what you need to do. It's
Mm-hmm.
like with me. They told me I had 2 years to live.
Mm-hmm.
That's 45 years ago. But
Someone's
see,
calendar was
me
off.
volunteering my body, but even going back to the farmers for an example, I remember my dad, we had, new soil and wheat was this tall and there was a lot of straw and they were doing everything by the trash machine, putting it on a pile. But then all of a sudden here comes the combines.
Mm.
So they took in their match in the fall of the year, they would just go around the field,
Mm-hmm.
light a match into it and burn the straw off.
Mm-hmm.
That was a mistake
Mm-hmm.
because the more residue that you leave under your trees and in your garden, so even my garden, when I in the fall of the year, I'd rake all my leaves and they would go into the garden, 6 inches deep.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I wanted to plant it, I open it
And just
and put the seed in there and put everything back. The
mm-hmm.
plants come through the leaves, but I could water that garden every other week
It
and it
stayed
would grow.
moist. Yeah, it
But
stayed
if I didn't
moist.
have the leaves there,
Yeah.
so the farmer was doing the same thing. Instead of burning the straw off, he did a no-till. A no-till is the same thing. The straw that's there covers the grain. All they do is have fingers that go in, they put the seed in, and it's obviously spray, which is not a good idea either for the weeds.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, the spray gets back to us again.
Yes,
And
it
how many
does.
people,
Yes, it does.
when somebody says it's organic and you're on the bottom of it by the river, and the
Mm-hmm.
farmer up here on top of the hill is spraying his crop, what do you got? You ain't got organic.
Right, it's gonna roll.
Come down.
The rain's
But
gonna
see,
bring it
we have
down.
to
Yeah.
take common sense
Yeah.
that are we in the right place and
Yes. Yes.
are we doing the right things to make it healthy?
Well, excellent.
And how many
Excellent.
times, but the point I'm getting at, sometimes you have to volunteer for certain things. And I don't know how many times I volunteered to go and school people,
Mm-hmm.
uh, finding out even when I was on the Indian reservation, the young man that I was ministering to or shaping him up was a great great grandson of Sitting Bull,
Mm-hmm.
and even sent him to college.
Hmm.
And it didn't work out the way I wanted it to, but he could have
You could have
been
become
an
if you
asset.
wanted
See?
to. Yes.
So this is what I'm trying to say to
Mm-hmm.
this to the countries: that you see somebody that has gifting in certain areas of their life, and we need to support them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because that's the future, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it isn't the
Absolutely.
machinery all the time. It's
Well,
sometimes human beings we got to shape too.
yeah. Let's see how time is up. So, um, well, this is a message to a nation or a message to the nations, and these are important talking points, that things to consider. So, if we can anything, if you can take anything away from this, it's get together collectively and see what you can do. Work together.
Uh,
Don't work against each other. Don't allow envy to stop you
mm,
from doing what you as a community need because someone else might be a little further along than you. Don't forget those that are behind you at the same time, right? Because you will need them eventually, right? And uh,
just what we discussed tonight is setting up, like say if it's a state or even a county, to set up that leadership. You
mhm,
pick out people that can lead, and when the bank looks at it and you want to borrow the money to do something, or if it's whatever's happening in your life, they look at what can them leaders do and how they're going to
mhm,
keep it under control.
mhm.
And
Yeah,
then money gets paid back, but you have gotten something like me. 20 years later, I'm still getting dividends from the REA yet.
yeah.
And they have gas stations, they have
Wow.
powerhouses, and all this stuff that's creating wealth.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. That's
But
good.
it
Good
also creates the
discussion.
future, doesn't it?
Good discussion. Yes, it does.